counterparts looked a little something like this. See, women are idealized too. I don't know what you're complaining about. No, real women don't always look like that, do they? See? See, you shouldn't complain. And now that you've had that kind of assault on your senses, let's imagine that you don't just see this in games themselves, but you also see it from your fellow gamers. Horribly bruised. Yeah, pretty dire, huh? But you see, all of this is born out of a long history and tradition. If we look back to the very, very first computer programmers, we will see that programming technology, computers, they've always been a very female-dominated field. This is Ada Lovelace. She was the very first computer programmer. And she even had a programming language named after her, which spawned off a wave of programming languages all named after women, such as Lua and Ruby and Pearl. And this is Rear Admiral Grace Hopper. She invented the first compiler and also the COBOL programming language. And I don't know who COBOL was named after, but I'm sure she was pretty important. So as you can see, since the 1950s, programming has always been seen as an activity for girls. I mean, like, it was even cited as, yes, it's just like preparing a meal. Why would you ever get a man to prepare your meal for you? I mean, like, they probably poison you or something. Making a meal is important business. And you know, it's the same with programming. Men just don't have the kind of focus and determination that you would need to solve all of these hard programming problems. I mean, maybe they can do a little bit of basic number crunching, but they can't do the hard stuff that requires thinking and planning. And so, food. There's a biological basis to it. There's this emerging field of psychology, evolutionary psychology. Perhaps you have heard of it. And it says that our gender differences have something to do with our hunter-gatherer ancestors. You see, back in prehistoric times, women collected all of the berries and nuts that were very, very important staples of the daily hunter-gatherer diet. Whereas men, they just went off and threw rocks at large animals so they could kind of get out of the way and let women do their thing for a while. Like, sometimes they maybe bring back a wild animal or two once in a while, but that was kind of rare. The women were the ones doing the real, dependable work. So since video games were pretty much invented by programmers, and the majority of programmers are women, it stands to reason that video games, for the most part, are made by women for women. Simple deductive reasoning. So, women who enter the game industry have this huge support network of other women, because that's who all the veterans are. We get to see people just like us making games all the time, so we get it into our heads that, hey, maybe I can make games too. So we do, and so when we get into the game industry, game development, it's full of all this camaraderie and sisterhood, and it's like when we're going to work, it's not like work at all. We're hanging out with our best buddies and we're partying 24/7. Isn't it wonderful? Men, they just aren't that well represented. Like, usually, like, the only men in game development companies are, like, the receptionist. And it doesn't help that from grade school on, men are discouraged from studying subjects like math and engineering. So not many men make it that far in the first place. You can imagine how discouraging that must be. But who can blame them with the whole clubhouse mentality? Seriously. Who wants to work with a bunch of immature ladies all day? Like, not only are our work environments super unprofessional, they are completely hostile to the opposite sex. We've got our sexy firemen on our cubicles, playgirl pinups, and we have our wild industry parties with Chippendales dancers and oh man! And don't get me started on all of the poop jokes. Seriously. Oh, ladies. So, what happens is, the few men who do work in the game industry are always assumed to be someone's boyfriend. Boys don't make games, so he must be here with someone. You know, that's the most likely explanation. And if not, then, hey, maybe he's a booth dude. That's probably the most likely thing. I mean, like, conventions, they are swarming with booth dudes everywhere. And like, who can blame those men in the industry for looking like them? I mean, they're always wearing short shorts and tight shirts, so, yeah. Ooh, getting hot in here. And to make it worse, when these men are at their jobs, their abilities just aren't taken as seriously as their female colleagues. Yeah, so if they screw one thing up, it's representative of their entire gender. And obviously that doesn't happen to women, because, like, if she makes a mistake, it's just her mistake. You know how that goes? And then what happens is, men on average get paid only 70% of what women make, and they constantly see women more junior than they are get promoted over them while they stay in the same position for years and years. It's the whole glass ceiling thing again. Yeah, we keep hearing about it, but You know what? Some people say that it's not just women's fault, it's the men themselves. They don't know how to negotiate for higher positions. Men don't ask. And never mind that most of the time, all the people making decisions in the first place are women, so they are more likely to feel empathy and listen to other women when they ask for raises. But a man who asks is too pushy, you know? It's like, yeah, they're out of line. It's not becoming for a man to be too confident about his own abilities and assertive about his talents. Of course, another aspect of the glass ceiling is that eventually men have to go home and raise the kids. Yeah, it's really, really hard to have such a demanding career like the one the video game industry expects of you, and also raise a family. I mean, they can try for flex hours too if they want, but everyone knows that a person who comes in 12 hours a day and works 7 days a week is obviously more of a better worker than someone who only comes in for 4 hours a day and goes home to spend time with the kids and stuff. You know how it goes. And some people say that women should take a more egalitarian role in family and child rearing and housework and that sort of thing. But that's impractical. Women are the ones giving birth. Going through labor. How can you expect them to do so much more work than that? It's unfair. That said, we're trying to get better. Really, we are. It's becoming common knowledge that video games aren't just for the 18 to 34 female demographic anymore. The fastest growing market for games is, in fact, middle-aged house husbands. And this is attributed to a certain surge in popularity of casual games, which have recently exploded on a certain popular social network that a lot of men happen to enjoy spending time on. I think you know the one. Yeah, so on Google Plus, you will find a lot of these 1-minute time waster games that where you get to do such activities as mow the lawn, fix your car, and decide which urinal to use. Yes. You know what? These games just sound really, really boring to us enlightened gamers, but the fact is, men and boys just aren't into fantasy worlds like women are. They want realism. Yeah, they don't like to have to imagine things. It's hard for them. What can I say? Men's brains sure are weird. And also, men just aren't as good at video games as women are. They don't have the same attention span that we do. They don't have the patience to sit through 30 to 40 hours of content and narratively rich experiences that we've come to expect from AAA games. Studies have shown that there's even science to back it up. More boys than girls are diagnosed with ADHD. So if we have to make games for men, they have to be short and they can't be too complex. So to tap into this underserved and potentially lucrative market, it's becoming more and more necessary to recruit more men into the game industry so they can share these secrets of the inscrutable male brain. So we have men in games organizations. We even have mentorship programs to get boys and young men interested in game design. Get it? Mentorship. Yeah, of course, women are still really, really heavily involved in them because we don't don't want to leave women out. They might get sad. And also, we've been having these incubator-like initiatives where we've been getting a bunch of men together in a room together to learn how to make their own games. Isn't it amazing? But they haven't really been that successful because they spend too much time talking about how much it sucks to be a man in a woman's world and not enough time, actually making their games. So if they could just stop being so angry and stop caring so much about gender and be grateful for this fantastic opportunity they're being given, maybe they can get some actual work done for a change, and maybe they'd actually get somewhere in the industry. Good news now. It's easier than ever to make games, because you don't have to be a programmer anymore. You can be an artist. You can be a producer. You can be a QA person. And you can even be like an office manager. And you can even make games using those super easy push button and make a game tools that they're making these days. I mean, sure, if you want something more than like a derivative platformer with bad controls, you may have to do a little bit of programming. Just a little. Okay, maybe not a little. But it's not so bad. And there are indie games. Since you're not bound by the constraints of a publisher, you can make whatever kinds of games you want. And in fact, there are small companies being formed by such companies called things like Him Interactive and Binary Brothers. Games for by real men for real men. Except, since you're not bound by the constraints of a publisher, you have no money. How can you compete with those AAA representations or their marketing budgets? Really, it's a travesty. Plus, you have to subsist on nothing but ramen for months on end to make a decent living at this. What man in his right mind would have the drive and determination to do that? It's always been women who have suffered for their art. Look at Sylvia Plath. Her battles with depression. Look at Emily Dickinson, locking herself up in her room in solitude, cranking out all that sad poetry. Men are too sociable to want to spend that much time alone. But hey, if they're willing to give it a shot, more power to them. There have also been pushes within the industry to make our male game characters more realistic and not to rely too much on certain body parts. Take the popular Mass Effect series. Sure, it has some chick on the cover just like every other game out there, but as it turns out, you can customize Commander Shepard to be a man. And as it turns out, because Shepard acts the same regardless of which gender you choose, you can play as a man and not be subjected to awful stereotypes. Because of this, the male version of Shepard, who people call Shep, I don't know why they do. It sounds fancy in French. Maybe it's better than like Man Shep or whatever it is. But yeah, Shep is a fan favorite, and even the girls love him. Probably because of all the same-sex romance options he gets. Yeah. Of course, gay women have had to wait until the third game for their equivalent, but they're more of a niche market. I mean, two girls together, ew, gross. Seriously, ugh! There's also a new Monkey Island reboot that is exploring Guybrush Threepwood's origin story. So, like, you may know Guybrush Threepwood as this really, really sexy, badass, and very well-endowed pirate. And, but in this new game, he's actually reasonably proportioned, if a bit waifish, and he's so adorable and vulnerable, and you just want to be his protector. And he gets into all of these horrible situations and gets almost raped. Wait, I'm not allowed to say that anymore. It's called close and physical intimidation. Right? But the thing is, for most companies that aren't EA, creating extra male character models costs too much money. It's not worth the amount of effort required to include them. It's money that can be better spent on like realistic wall textures or unicorn fart particle effects. Like you have to rate them differently and animate them differently because they move around, like, you know, and so differently. And then you have to hire realistic male voice actors. So much more budgetary constraints for that. Plus, men wear pants instead of skirts, and it's so much harder to animate 2 legs instead of just one flowing gown. I mean, like, okay, so sometimes men wear kilts, but you wouldn't be able to tell it's a man. Seriously. And of course, groin physics. We gotta have those. They gotta be realistic. Plus, let's just face it, sex sells. If we didn't have sexy men in our games, nobody would buy them. And we wouldn't be able to pay off our mortgages and go on vacations to Cancun. The economic reality is such that women just like looking at men and men just like being looked at. It's science! We're hardwired that way! And also, let's not forget that it's men who have the real power here. Like, we women are powerless to a man's beauty and charms and all that stuff we do to get ahead in the corporate world. We're doing it also that men will fall in love with us, and it's been that way all throughout civilization. All the wars we fought, all the giant structures we built, it's all for you, boys! And it's especially hard for us nerds because all men want jerk jocks, not nice gals. We're the ones being victimized here. We put up with all those wedgies in junior high because we were told that it would pay off in the end, that we would eventually get rich and famous off of our brain power and highly specialized interests. But now we are rich and famous, and the boys still are falling all for us. They keep making fun of us for playing video games instead of being sociable. So can you blame us for being a little bit testy? So you see, all that hostility and uninclusiveness and the trolling, it's all because we're sexually frustrated and can't get dates. Really, there's all there is to it. It has nothing to do with privilege or anything like that. It's actually men who have privilege. All they have to be is good looking. That's all. Just stand around shirtless and with a big smile and stuff. Well, we have to actually, like, do work and stuff. Okay, sure, there are ugly guys too sometimes, but you know what? You just take off the glasses and fix the hair up a bit, and poof! It's just... See, just like an 80s teen movie. See, boys, it's not hard. Yeah, it's not like you have to be, like, smart or get jobs or anything. And besides, men have their own hobbies, like shoes and stuff. Why do they have to encroach on our territory? Video games are and always have been a girl thing. They are a last place a woman can kick back and just be a woman. You can't take that away from us. There's this societal assault on womanhood. It's like you're trying to turn us into men, and we don't want that. So, you know what? What's the point? What's the point of any attempt to be inclusive? Like, it's not going to work. Men and women are just too different. That's just how it's always going to be. All right, can I go home now? I'm done with this. I'm going to go home. the point in the presentation where I dislodge my tongue from my cheek and ask you one thing. How is this not ridiculous when the genders are flipped around? Seriously. I'm going to let you in on a bit of a secret, though. This alternate universe I presented to you, it's actually not the kind of universe I actually want. And I think it's worth saying, even though I can't speak for everyone, I don't think this is what most of us card-carrying, humorless feminists want either. For one thing, I'd rather live in a world where people didn't make so many broad assumptions about people based on what kind of plumbing they have. There's this whole idea that women and men are so different from each other, that we're opposites, almost as if we're some kind of different species. And in my experience, whatever differences exist between genders are not really that significant in the grand scheme of things, because people are different. The differences between women and a group and men as a group, those are nothing compared to the differences between individual men, individual women, and everything else, really. Gender isn't a binary system where some people are one thing and everyone else is the other thing. I know many of us computer people like binary systems, but the real world is so much more complex than that. I think of gender as more of a multi-dimensional hypercube. Just because we were born with a certain set of chromosomes doesn't mean that who we are is set and predetermined for life. Otherwise, how would people like me exist? So in my ideal world, instead of deciding that games with guns in them are for boys and games where you tend to a farm or whatever are for girls, we just make games for people. We'd make puzzle games for people who like to solve puzzles. We'd make shooty games for people who like to shoot things. We'd make platformers for people who like platformers, and narrative games for people who like narratives, and pretty princess games for people who want to be pretty princesses. And we'll also keep in mind that these people who play our games can be any gender. Yes, even the princess games, because no one should ever be deprived of the chance to wear a big poofy dress and too much makeup. And it's not even a matter of gender either. I'd like to see more games for people of any race, any sexual orientation, any economic class, any cultural background. We should be inclusive, not exclusive. It just makes better business sense to grow your audience and not shrink it. Besides, it just makes for better games. And as for those cheesecake depictions of sexiness I was showing early, the problem isn't that they exist, it's that they're so prevalent and homogenous. See, the difference between these pictures I showed earlier is that when I was looking for pictures of men, I had to sift through a bunch of fan art. And I found it like doing increasingly questionable kinds of Google searches, and I actually took out half of my slides because even I felt uncomfortable looking at them. But for the women's equivalents, I don't have to look hard at all. They are just like right there in front of me in advertising, at conventions, and in the games themselves. They are canon. And it's not a matter of imagination. It is just there, always there. But yeah, so whether it's men or whether one gender always being the focus of sexual attention and the other one just being people. And especially at a professional industry event. I mean, yeah, definitely not the place for it if I'm trying to do my job. And also, this should probably go without saying, but don't harass people. I don't think I should have to say this to any of you, because you're all so awesome, but seriously, I don't want to see any more death threats, or rape threats, or sexual propositions in a non-sexual environment. It's not cool, it's not funny, it's not even ironically funny, it's just don't, okay? And I'm not really that into cheesecake depictions of sexuality either. It's like, I find games more interesting when they have humans in them, not over-sexualized blow-up dolls. And I want to see people in contexts other than sex or violent sex, because real maturity isn't the same thing as being rated M for mature. And I want to see stories that aren't just about getting the boy or the girl or the alien or whatever, because real relations aren't about unlocking an achievement. There's so much more to them than that. I want to play games about what happens afterwards, what happens in the mundane day-to-day life of a relationship, and what happens when a relationship ends. And romantic relationships aren't even the only ones that exist anyway. I want to see more games about friendship or family. And while I'm at it, I want to see more plots that don't strictly follow the hero's journey. Descriptive, not prescriptive. And while I'm at it, I also don't want to see stories that are about pure good or pure evil. Because no one I know is actually purely good or purely evil, and we don't even know what those things mean anyway, and that just makes people more interesting, seriously. And I want to see people in games who aren't so homogenous. I want to see diverse ensemble casts that don't just mean like one woman in a group of men or one person of color in a group of white people, because that's tokenism. I want to see more games that pass the Bechdel test. Does anyone know what the Bechdel test is? Does anyone not know? Alright, for those of you in the audience, it's when you have two women who talk to each other about something other than a man. But I think this should apply to any historical minority in a group of majority people, and any kind of marginalized groups. Because the more diversity you have in your cast, the more your characters can be like people, instead of one-dimensional representations of gender or race or sexuality or culture. And while we're at it, I'd love to see more games where the gameplay is something other than combat. There are way more interesting stories to be told then, and then I blew his brains out. And like, my feelings on violence in games are the same as my feelings on sexy cheesecake games. It's okay that they exist, but the fact that they're so omnipresent actually kind of disturbs me. And yeah, but then I'm the one who makes games about people talking all the time. Basically, I want games about what it means to be human. And there are many ways to be human, as many as there are people, and I want to experience more of them. And none of these ways fall into a binary two-party system of gender. Of course, I realize I'm being kind of idealistic. I know a lot of people are still really invested in the way things are, in the way women are, and the way men are, and just because we were taught things in a certain way, I mean, it's like, and you haven't really experienced something outside of the contrary, sometimes, yeah, it's hard to sometimes shift your worldview, I get it. And it isn't even a problem specific to video games either. It's societal. Some people would sneer at me for being so idealistic, saying, you can't change society, it's not realistic. And I get this even from people who claim to be on my side. But you know what? I'm going to say, ironic detachment is so 2009. There's only so much that covering your ears and going la la la, I can't hear you, is going to accomplish, which is to say nothing. And we have the power to make small changes in our own industry. We can make games about our diverse life experiences. And when I was talking about games becoming easier and easier to make, I wasn't joking. And I actually think this is a good thing. And I'm going to be like the umpteenth person to plug Anna Anthropy's book, Rise of the Video Game Zinesters, but read it. It's recommended reading for everyone. But that's not going to make all of the bad representations go away, so we also have to speak out about them. Because what would freedom of speech be without freedom from criticism? So, yeah, definitely, like, blog, tweet. If you see something problematic, rant about it. Vote with your dollars. Maybe if we're loud enough, then we can convince the mainstream game industry to be more inclusive and stop being so completely gross and sexist and cheesecakey. And you know what, in fact, this is already happening. That's why there's such a backlash. There's a backlash because they see us as a threat. So we have to keep it up. We have to not let the haters get us down. Thank you for watching. And also, thank you to Courtney for putting together this amazing conference. I'm glad it's for something like this. Seriously, it's been really inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't believe it took until the end of day 2 to get privileged night dude to a conference that I organized. So we're not done yet. We're going to take a quick 5-minute bathroom break and meet back here for the closing keynote, which is to see the games that people were working on while our like lazy asses were sitting in here listening to people talk about it. So I'll see you in 5 at 5 p.m.